Hello my creative friends, and it's time to do another paint along. Today we're going to be working on this cute little bumblebee, and for those who are in my Ko-fi membership, you can go over there. You're going to get the tracer for this particular painting. I'll leave the information down inside of the description box if you'd like to take a look. Now today I'm trying a new paper. I am using this little pad, and this is the Canson Mixed Media Rough Paper. It's 114 pound. It's a little bit thicker than your normal mixed media paper, and it's a lot smoother than the watercolor paper I normally use. So I had a really nice way of being able to glide my acrylic paints on there, and I like that really well. Now this is bound by a spiral, so I can easily make this into a journal if I wanted to. Well, I'm going to start the first processes of showing what you do, and you can either paint it like I do, or you can choose to do it whatever way you want to, because really once the image is drawn on, you can go ahead and use whatever medium makes you happy. So I'm going to be showing you this process, and I'm going to be starting with an outline process. I'll probably speed through this because you don't need me to watch it all, but you'll get the idea of what I'm doing. Now for this particular one, I'm going to be doing the process of doing the outline on mine first. I'm going to be mixing some black and then a little bit of Admiral Blue, and I'm going to be mixing that up. I don't remember to do this as often as I should, but you really should use a palette knife to mix your paint with. It's going to save your brushes. So often what I do is I just grab my brush and I mix it up, but you really do want to use a palette knife if you can. It's going to save your brush from all that paint going up inside the ferrule and damaging your brush. But I'm going to take some of this neutral color and do the outline. I'm going to go ahead and speed through this process as I do this, so you can watch, but you don't need to watch. When I'm creating my line work, I do add a little bit of water to my paint. I'm using a round brush, a number 6. This painting isn't too big, so that number works perfectly for this size of painting. And I'm just using a regular pressure on my brush. I'm not looking to have perfect lines. I want to have some variance actually, so I get a nice irregular line work when I'm doing this process. Well, she's all done, looking cute as can be, and now I'm going to go ahead and tone my whole thing with this color Cadmium Orange. I'm going to put a nice rich background all over it, and then I'm going to be building on top of it. So this is going to give me that popping color and make my colors really vibrant underneath, and that's why I'm going to start with this color. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like all toned and ready to layer the paint. Okay, I have all my little gal all painted red. Let's go ahead and start her face. I'm going to be starting to use some of this color Warm Beige and a little bit of light cinnamon on there. May dash in a little bit of the light buttermilk on there as well. But I'm going to start toning this, and perhaps on her wings too I'll use those colors. I'm not quite for sure. I think I'm going to be doing from like down here, maybe a little bit darker, and then work my way light. So I'm going to start with those colors, and then we'll see where we end up. When I'm putting these in, I'm just doing irregular brush strokes, and I'm not trying to cover up all my dark lines. I still want to see some of those. Now she's not going to have red eyes in the end, but those are just going to be the under colors of where I'm starting to paint. Okay, so let's brush this in. Take a little bit of my cinnamon color. I'm adding a little bit of a dark up towards this off to the edges, because that's where the shadows would be, and she's going to be brighter and lighter in the middle of her face. Okay, leave that go. Now let's work a little bit on the striping. I'm going to choose a golden color, and I think I have some sitting here. Here's a little bit of this color called Golden Sunset. And so the striping of my bee is going to be, I want this one to end as black. So black, yellow, black, yellow, black, yellow, black. So that one would be dark. So take a look at your striping on the pattern. That's how I have it set up as well. I'm going to be mixing some of this gold and perhaps a little bit of this light buttermilk as well. And let's use those color combinations to build up the yellow. Now nothing's going to get done in one step, so we're going to have to put on multiple layers. So black, yellow. You can see I'm moving my brush around in multiple directions, so I'm not just doing even strokes. I want to be able to see some of that stroking of my brush underneath there. Okay, let's move over to the wings. All I know is that they're going to be light, and perhaps there'll be some yellow in there as well. We'll see how it all builds up. I don't have an exact plan in my head. And often, sometimes it changes as I'm moving along. So just because I think I'm doing one thing, it may turn into another thing, and a lot of times it does. Put a little bit of that gold in there too. When you're doing this style of painting, you want to just take your time, build your colors as you go, give it time to develop and not rush the process into what you're going to be doing. Now this is going to be black. I'm going to be adding the black, but what I'm going to be using is I'm going to be using that same color that I mixed up. I'm going to be using some of that first, that darker blue color, and then perhaps add a little bit of, let's use a little bit of this color, raw umber, a darker brown. So I'm not looking to do just a plain black. I'm thinking I want to add a couple different colors. So let's start with that. Let's do a little bit of that navy color and a little bit of the dark brown and see what we end up with. Black is such a flat color a lot of times, so by mixing these two colors together, I'm hoping to get a more lively color in the end. While putting this black on in this area, I'm still looking to keep some of that red still showing. I want to start these steps slow and then gradually build them. So I'm brushing in the black blue color, and I'm going to be seeing some black blue in the end, but the black blue looks so much more alive than just a solid black color. You could also add a little bit of green in this color if you wanted to change it up even a little bit more. You could add a little bit of turquoise in this color, whatever you want to add to your black or to create a dark color. I'd suggest not using black, but choosing something different. This particular black blue worked really well, and I was happy with the end results. Okay, so there we have the beginning steps of that. Let's fill in that banner. And let's maybe use a little bit of a lighter color as well for that. Let's start with that buttermilk color and see where we end up with that. So let's lay that in. Let's perhaps pick up a little bit of this spa blue, just to add a little bit of color to that area as well. Now this is craft paint, so it might take a few layers to get all colored in. Now let's decide on some colors for those flowers, and I'm thinking I want cactus flower and like in the pinks and the coral colors. So let's use a little bit of this coral blush. So let's use a little bit of that color, and we'll start with those and see where we end up with those. The technique I use to paint the flowers is a dirty brush technique. I'm picking up color, but I'm not washing out my brush in between the different colors. So I'm picking up the one, brushing it on, taking another one. I can also double load my brush at the same time with two different colors. My strokes, I try to keep them in kind of comma strokes, and I build the layer up of paint in a direction of way a flower might grow. And that gives you an idea or more of a feeling of that my item is more round. I'm still trying to leave a little bit of that red and not cover up all those dark lines. I decided to go ahead and add a darker red color called Deep Burgundy just to add another layer of richness to my flowers. So I layered that color on. A little later, I am going to be adding some fluorescent pink to my flowers. If you watch me often, you know I love the Liquitex Basic fluorescent colors, especially the fluorescent pink. It always adds a special little brightness to my flowers, and I'll be adding that a little bit later. But I wanted to try a little bit of the dark to see if I could get a little bit more interest in these flowers. Again, it's all about layering and just starting with the layers and then build your painting up. Okay, let's start a little bit on the background of this color. And let's work in a little bit of the darker colors. Let's use some, or change up colors. Let's use some Bahama blue and a little bit of, let's use some of this color too. Seaside, so like in these bluish greens a little bit, and perhaps even dash in a little bit of some purple with some of the pinks. And let's start a graduation of color in the background. I decided to fill in those little yellow parts of the boots, well, of her legs while I'm waiting before I start. So I'm going to add that yellow there as a placekeeper, so I remember to leave the yellow in there. Okay, let's start a little bit of that background. To paint my background, I'm still using the same dirty brush technique where I'm picking up colors and blending them as I go. I'm still wanting to have a little peaks of that red showing through. I'm not wanting to have full coverage. You'll eventually get more and more of your red covered up by adding more layers. This particular layer is just the beginning one, and I'm not trying to finish it all in one pattern or one pass through my painting. This is just the beginning one. I also want to keep in mind, I really don't want to cover up all of my black lines. I still want to see some of those around my flowers, around the wings, in those particular areas. So I'm just building my layers up as they go. The reason why I chose these colors is because the majority of my picture is done in warm colors right now, with the flowers being that warm pinks and oranges, those colors, and having that warm red background. I wanted to add some contrast, so by using the Sea Breeze, the Bahama Blue, and the Purple Pizzazz colors, those are all cool colors, and that's going to help bring the contrast to my painting and really bring it that pop of color I'm looking for. And at this point, this is when I decided I want to add in a little bit of that fluorescent pink color by Liquitex. It is really a favorite color of mine to use in a lot of different paintings, not just flowers. I like adding that color. It's just a really bright pop of color. If you like painting bright and colorful, look into some of the other Liquitex fluorescent colors. You might like adding those to your paintings as well. This is just the next layering process. I'm going to be taking some of that fluorescent pink, a little bit of the other pinks again, and just adding more layers to my flowers. Again, this is just a painting about adding the layers. I'm still trying not to cover up all those black marks. If you do end up covering up a lot of your black lines that you wanted to keep, you could go back in with your round brush and stroke some of them in and then go back over and paint over them. That's the one good thing about acrylic paint versus watercolor, which often I love watercolor too. But the one thing about acrylic paint is there's a lot of grace, and you can always cover it up and add another layer if there's something that you want to add to it or subtract. And then now I'm going to go ahead and work a little bit more on her face. I'm going to return back to those original colors that I used, the warm beige, the light buttermilk, and a little bit of light cinnamon. And I'm going to be adding another layer on there. This is the time I'm going to be covering up those eyes too. I know she looked a little spooky to have those red eyes for such a long time, but I'm going to be covering those up and just blending my colors just like I did with everything else with a dirty brush. I'm also going to be adding some highlights onto those little yellow areas using some of the light buttercream. I like to reserve really bright white to the very end, so I like to layer my shades of white too. So I'm using the buttercream. It's still going to show bright, but it's not as bright as pure white. Then I'm going to be coming back in and adding a little bit more shading around my little Bumblebee's face. I'm going to be using some more of that cinnamon color and adding in a little shadow. On this particular one, it is a little dark right in the center of her face, but I'll fix that in the end. Acrylic paint always dries slightly darker, so once you see it when it's wet, it's going to look a little different as it dries. Sometimes you don't see those little marks until it dries, and then it kind of pops out at you. And I did notice that little darker area, but I'll fix that in the end. I wanted to go ahead and add another layer of that blue-black color over the top of the blacks just to strengthen up that darker area again and covering up some of the little bit of the reds popping through, but not all of them again. So I'm just adding another layer to the darks as well. And hopefully you can see in the video where you can still see little pops of that red shining through. Now that my background has had a little time to dry, I can go back in and add little bright pops of color back there too, and it kind of had flattened out. Because the red is underneath there, it does affect the colors you're layering on top, and these are mostly craft paints, so they are going to look a little flatter. So I want to be able to go ahead and add another layer of the colors that I just put on. Now I don't have to worry about layering them in the same direction because you want it to be varied, and again I'm using that dirty brush technique where I'm brushing on my colors but not washing my brush out in between the colors. I was thinking in my mind I wanted the bottom part to have a little bit more purple, and then as it went up it would be a little bit more into the blues and that blue-green color. I needed to add another layer onto the banner, so I added a brighter color, again the light buttermilk on the top, but I did pick up a blue. You can still see some of the blue through it and some of the purple. I'm going to let all this dry, and then I'm going to start working on her face a little bit more. To do the eyes, for those who have gotten the tracers, if you feel like you want to retrace your eyes, take a piece of transfer paper, put it over her face, and then go over the eyes again, and they will transfer over and you'll be able to see them better if you feel like you need to be able to see them. I was able to see mine fine through my paint, so I just went ahead and I started with a little bit of white. I used a small round brush, and I used the color Snow Titanium White for the whites of her eyes. And then for the color of her irises, I liked the idea of using the green. So I used a color called Hauser Light Green, which is kind of a medium shade of green, and then the bright pops of green in her eyes are called Citron Green. And I love that combination of green for green eyes. So I made her eyes green, and then the dark little pupils of her eyes, I used a black for that. I used lamp black for the black part of her eyes. I went ahead and just made them a solid black. I'll be doing some dip dot drags or dip dots with my stylus to add the highlights to her eyes. All living things have highlights in their eyes, and that just adds a little bit of sparkle to her eyes by adding those little dots into her eyes. Here I'm adding the irises in with a small little brush. I can't remember if I just said it was a size 6 with a nice round pointy tip on it. I just got a bunch of new brushes at Michael's. I went shopping at Michael's. I live probably about an hour away from Michael's, so I don't get to go very often. And I decided to treat myself to a bunch of new brushes. And I bought the Artist Loft brushes. And so far, so good. I kind of like them. It's nice having new brushes. I'm going to be lightening up her face a little bit and tweaking some of the colors. I'm not using white on her face. I'm using that buttermilk, that light buttermilk color. It looks like white, but it's not really white. And I'm going to be blending a little bit of that gold color as well, the golden sunset color on her face, and just softening up those areas that looked a little dark. And now I add a little bit of that bright white color to my wings just to add that little bit of sparkle to it. That's going to be the brightest white. I come back down and add a little bit more of the spa blue color and blended it with some of that bright white on top. I hadn't used the bright white yet there, so I wanted to add just a little bit of the white, but I toned it down with some of the spa blue as well. This is when I'm also going to tweak my background. I'm going to look at it to make sure I don't have large patches of color. I want that color to have a blended feel but still have some movement in there. So this is the time I'm going to check my background to see what my colors look like. I'm looking to help my background have not so many patchy marks in it, like big groups of like purple or those darker colors. I want to make sure it has a blended look, but still have some of the same colors kind of going through. I hope that makes sense. You can see how I'm adding some of the purple back in, but going over with the blue and just blending my background a little bit more. I'm still going to see little pops of that red through it. Believe it or not, even though I have added quite a few layers, I'm still going to have little peaks of that red undertone that we base coated started out with first. To create the rosy cheeks for my bumblebee, I used that color Deep Burgundy. That was the color that I had already used on my flowers. I take a little bit on a scruffy brush and then brush it and rub it into my hand. And when it feels dry, I know I have enough removed to go ahead and create that pretty little blush look for my cheeks. To add some more detail work to my painting, I was going to be using my 9XXB pencil. I was going to be using this to add the outlines to her eyes and her mouth and her nose, and adding her little lashes on there too. I also add just a few little eyebrows at the top. She very much has the look of a human face, but that's what I kind of like about this one, is that it's an animal, but it has that human quality to it. This is where I'm using my stylus to add some dots. Super hard to say, but adding those little small dots with my stylus is the perfect little tool to be able to add these small sparkles to the eyes, and I add them to the top of her cheeks as well. And I put a few on the bottom lip just to add a little bit more glimmer to that bottom lip. I use the pencil to create a little bit of line work inside of her wings to give them a little bit more dimension. And I'm also going to be using the pencil on the black areas. It kind of is a soft charcoal look in the end, but I do add some line work going back and forth and do sketch around some of the other areas, like around his shoes and those different areas. I'm going to be using a softer charcoal pencil next to create some darker, rich black lines. I wanted to create a larger dot pattern on her forehead, and I don't have a stylus large enough to do that, so I just used the end of my paintbrush and used some of the white paint to create the dot pattern across her forehead. I rechecked the background and I rechecked my flowers and added a little bit more color, and then this is the point I decided, well, maybe perhaps I needed to add a little bit of the black back in. Sometimes I overthink things, and perhaps I did at that point, but I did go ahead and add just a little bit more black, and then I'm going to come back in with my color and repaint those areas a little bit to soften that black area. Again, it's just that dance of put some in, take some out, and just do it to where you feel like you're more happy. Sometimes it's a good idea to walk away from your painting and then come back and take a second look. That was the General Charcoals pencil in a 4B soft, and that was what I was going to do to add the next layer of really dark marks. This has got a beautiful soft quality of charcoal, and it really does show up well on those darker colors. And I add just a little bit of it on the striping and some around my little banner at the bottom. I just love doing a little bit of sketch quality. Now these are all just extra things that I did, and if you don't happen to have these pencils, you don't need to have them. These are all just little things that I enjoy doing. But if you would like to add a few more mark making tools to your painting kit, I would highly recommend adding a Kimberly 9XXB pencil and some of the General soft charcoal pencils. I think you'll enjoy using them. A final bit of color I added was the Liquitex Basic Color Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue. This yellow is a very translucent-y yellow, and it works perfect to add just a little bit of glow on top of the flowers and on the bee stripes that are yellow. I add even a little bit to her face. This color works perfect for this technique because it's very translucent. It just adds a subtle glow to those areas. The final detail I was going to be adding was some lettering to the front of the banner. I used my micron pen in the 01 size to be able to do the lettering, and then I just did a variety of uppercase and lowercase letters. For those who are using the tracer, this is when you would want to lay a piece of transfer paper down and then copy over the letters on the pattern, and then that should transfer your letters easily to the painting. If you don't have a transfer paper, you could just turn the copy, the tracer that you have, upside down and then go over the back of the letters with a very soft leaded pencil. And then that would create a carbon-like surface on the back. And then you could turn it back over and then transfer over your letters or right over the top. And then that will transfer that image of the letters to that painted area where you would like them. Well, let's take a look at what this little bumblebee looks like sitting in my studio. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this tutorial. If you like watching this tutorial, here's a couple more videos you might want to check out. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.